Hi, everybody. Good evening. So, today, hold up. There we go. Today, we're going to talk about differences that I experienced coming from Zambia, living there for many years, and then moving to the US, culture shocks, and just things I experienced in the education system that I think that I observed to be very, very different. It was so different that I had to have paradigm shifts in my perception, and I struggled through it. I should have had water. I do have water. I struggled through it because the normal way that the normal way, according to Zambia, according to the fundamentals that I was brought up, that I grew up learning, it was just a paradigm shift. Just I didn't have the skill sets and the tools to think and operate the way people from a different continent thought and perceived life and the way they went about getting educated. So let me just give a bit of a background. I was born in Zambia, in Africa. Did most of my schooling here, government schools, most of my life in Zambia. I finished up to grade 12. I did a bit of university. I did some university at CBU. What do you call CBU? Copperbelt University. And then after some time, I moved to the US where I went to Warren County Community College and then I went to Montclair State University. And boy, oh boy, was that different. Was that different compared to where I came from and the type of education I had. So I got myself some notes so I can stay on point. That way I don't go off topic. So one of the things that I've really, really come to understand is our limitations come we have our limitations because of the baselines that we were given by our caregivers and the society that we are born in. Anything that a society deems as normal is usually going to be fundamentals of how people in that area or coming from a certain area or country do think and what they see as normal and as common sense. So Zambia being a country that was colonized, and the education system that we have came from the British, obviously, and being to the US, which was never colonized, and the education system there was more on liberating. So it was time shift, and I did struggle. struggle. So let me go ahead and share some notes that I took down just so that I stay on. So one thing I noticed is that the education approach in colonized countries like Zambia versus countries like the USA differs significantly. Especially in terms of fostering free thinking, because things that I thought were free thinking are actually not free thinking. That's another topic for another day. But let me give an example. Free thinking and critical thinking development is something that I noticed that Zambia doesn't have. And this is how. Zambia being historically colonized, the systems were designed to produce obedient workers rather than independent thinkers. So it's a system to create followers and people who are obedient, you don't question authority, and that's the way it is. And it shapes how people think, how school systems as well teach. It's not interactive, it's more like command, it's more like the teacher is the be or it all, I don't know how to say that word. And the student is this obedient, rule following, not questioning what they're being taught, and just being able to memorize what they're taught and regurgitate the information, and then you pass. That's how I perceive most education systems, even in the US. But the difference is if someone is just obedient and they don't question, they don't have critical thinking, the way they're going to think and move around the world is going to be different than a system that makes you question. You might not have the highest IQ, but you question things because that's a norm. So I noticed that the influence still lingers in many post-colonial education system where rote memorization is like looked up to and authority-based learning dominant. So in schools, it's like it's a domination on the students. It's not igniting curiosity, if that makes sense. Many African education systems, including Zambia, emphasize on respect for elders. So even when I was growing up, you can never question an elder. You just give respect, and there is an assumption that the elder will always know more. Even if they don't, they do. It's just there. Weird, but strange, especially. I've always thought actually that it was strange, but if you think in a certain way which doesn't align and which can outcast you, you sort of like keep to yourself and just find a few people that maybe live the way that you respect and find igniting. So curricula are often influenced by external Western standards, which may not always encourage students to critically engage in their own history, culture, and social structures. So everything European, the education system we have here, I will see people with bachelor's, PhD, master's, whatever. But even if they do have that education system, I have noticed and I've come to understand why they can't even go and work abroad because they're coming from a system that is rooted in fear, rooted in not being questioned, rooted in not challenging ideas, but just okay, this is what it is. You learn about this, and that's the way it is, and you just go with it. Whether you're a doctor or like you don't just challenge things, you take them as the be all end all. So even if you see students, you see teachers, they have this authoritarian like kind of dominance, kind of demeanor when it comes to schools in Zambia and most African countries that were colonized. American non-colonized context, that is American education, which I experienced and I struggled because this is not what I grew up doing and knowing. Particularly at the higher levels, places more emphasis on debate. I used to find it annoying. And I experienced this now coming back to Zambia where people don't like to debate. They feel like you're threatening their identity and their view of the world. And it's almost like you're trying to, like, in their perception, it's almost like it's life and death. And if you want to kill their only identity that they have, their mind can even collapse. So it's very, very interesting. Very, very interesting, especially if someone believes that with their education or what they know, even if they're not educated, they know it all. Very, very hard to converse and have conversations, or even when you take a child to school where they have this thing where they update your genome, they update your consciousness by mutual respect. It's like, no, they want to play the authoritarian kind of figure. So USA, it really encourages on debate, critical analysis, and questioning authority. That's why even if you look at right now, the way the world is, if you look at USA and most Americans, it's like they're always questioning and talking about things, and it looks like chaotic from outside. It's like, if they could just do this and not fight it, there would be such a stronger country. But their fundamentals are on questioning everything, critical analyzing, regardless of the IQ, just being able to question things and not just take something that someone gives you as that's the entire truth, which I have come to appreciate, by the way. It encourages diverse viewpoints and independent research from an early age. Though this is not uniform across all states and schools, many emphasize on play student-led learning. So one thing I experienced even in the US is like the student is the master, for lack of better words. The student is in a leadership position, in an empowered position. It's about going through school with a sense of self-worth, a sense of apart from self, a sense of confidence, and also like creating leaders, not followers. That's something I really appreciated. Even if someone is just working in McDonald's, even if someone is just cleaning floors, whatever, they have this self-worth within them in the way they approach things. And it's like people in the USA or USA citizens or anyone living there have a sense of responsibility in what they do, because it's like the value system really, really is great for people who are independent thinkers and for people to grow as an individual. So I appreciate that, especially if you want to discover yourself and if you want to go beyond social norms. It values people finding themselves and being as productive as possible. So, in that regard, the bias and social conditioning in learning. So, Zambia education often reflects social and cultural norms and emphasize on a collective kind of traditional values. So no independent thinking, no independent research, no questioning. It's just like this is what it is, and that's the end of it all. And some people keep on re-agitating this to the kids, and free will is not a thing. Choice is not a thing. It's like that's the way it is, and that's the way it should be. Which doesn't produce the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musks of the world, because they want everybody to be at a certain standard. Religious and cultural influences may shape what is considered as acceptable knowledge, limiting discussions on topics like sexuality, political dissent, and alternative worldviews. This one, it's a major thing here. Western or colonial historians may still dominate curricula, sidelining indigenous knowledge and perspectives. So, all this for me is inspired because I do have a child who was born in America, and she went to her the fundamental schools there, and now in Zambia. And I see how everybody is fear based when they're trying to make her do something or teach her something, and she just shuts down. Because this is another thing I noticed, the different patterns there, because of questioning the status quo, questioning anything where there's discussion. They've implemented and come to understand brains and people are different and people learn differently. So like one of the things that I experienced in the USA, I did much better in community college and university there than I ever did in the schools here in Zambia. And this is one thing I found. I don't like using the labels, but for context, I will. So I was diagnosed with ADHD or something like that. Yeah. And when I'm in an exam or anything, if you give me an exam paper or questioning and it's like 1 hour, I will not be done in 1 hour. So I always needed extra time. And they understood that the way our brain works and the way I'm able to like just read it and write it, for me, that is one of the hardest things you can give me to do. And I will do it and I could do it well. But it's jarring for me. It's very challenging. And it takes time for me to understand. Like I have to read something over and over and over again. So I ended up doing very, very well, actually, the best I've ever done in my education, because they understood my challenges and they've got systems where they work with you. And I see my daughter has got this as well. And in Zambia, there is nothing like that. So she is looked at and perceived as someone who's slow. But I know she's got a very good high Q, a very high IQ. She's very, very smart, very smart. But the methods in which she learns is not cut out for here in Zambia where she is. So it's part of the reasons that this has like encouraged me to make this video, especially just for anyone coming from the US coming here. in Africa or any country that has been colonized, or someone living in a colonized country going to the US. This is very beneficial, just so that social norms are very different, especially when it comes to school. Um, so, and many students are trained to excel in standardized testing and memorization rather than problem solving or creativity. So here they don't want, people are not taught to to problem solve or to be creative. People are problem oriented, not solution oriented here. And whenever you're talking about it, like they can't even tap on that wavelength because they're so focused on the problem, and it's all about this problem, that problem, that problem, that problem, but never solutions, um, which is not too good, especially for the country and the upcoming generations. There's limited access to learning tools like technology, books, laboratories, and some areas affect students' learning. But right now it's changed, but yes. USA students are often encouraged to find their own way of learning. And if you're coming from a colonized system and going there, that's going to be so hard. And for them, it's like, duh. So even when I'm conversing with a person after being in the US, I always do research when I'm curious about something or don't understand something. I'll be listening to something, and if I don't get it, I'll pause, research, and then go back to listening. So that part of me was cultivated after going in the US. Some thrive in project based learning, while others prefer traditional methods. More access to different learning tools, such as online resources, libraries, and hands on experiments. So true. Special education programs accommodate different learning styles: authority, visual, um, kinesthetic learners. So, in conclusion, while both Zambia and the US have education systems that shape students' thinking, systems still carry post colonial influences and emphasize on obedience. Obedience is so emphasized here that even with family members and people I'm with, they want me to, just obey. Even when they say something, they get offended when you don't obey. They really do, to a point where you can even be disowned. And it is so uncomfortable. So actually, even being back in Africa, I find it much better for my brain, for my own sanity, for my own evolution within my consciousness and being, to spend more time by myself, because then I can go as vast as I can, and my brain don't have the limitations that maybe people around me would have. And epigenetics, if the people you're around, like, you end up sinking to their wavelength. And no matter how great you are, how conscious you are, how smart, you usually come down to the people you surround yourself with. So that is something that I do for myself even here. In the contrast, USA, despite its own systematic bias, which it does have, encourages more free thinking and diverse learning methods. For Zambians, encourage more for Zambians, that would need to encourage more independent thinking, um, and more student-led inquiry, debate, and localized knowledge into their education system. I think that's very important, and that would be a game changer. Um, so that is something I wanted to share about the two differences. I posted a picture earlier today, a video today, and that one was made earlier on when I was in the US. I think now it's about 5 years when I made that. And that spoke more to my personal experiences. But now I put it in the context of education and experiences, because education, apart from just school as well, even as a traveler, as a business person, the people you will encounter, their minds will sort of like subscribe to a certain baseline that they have been placed into their minds by the school system and society. So this is something very powerful. Please like the video. Do share with someone who you know that would find this interesting. Anybody traveling to Africa, any African country, or traveling from Africa to the US, I think this will be a good fundamental, especially if you're going as a student, just so you know some of the differences. so that you can start preparing and climatizing, like really getting acquainted with social norms. And hopefully, it's going to be less traumatic and more enjoyable with these guidelines. So, this is nighttime. I'm about to go and sleep, but I wanted to create a video as an update from the previous one that I just made. And this is so important because when I was in Zambia, I couldn't find any motivation. No one in my sphere inspired me, no one. And when I went to the US, I really struggled. But one thing I knew, and this is going to sound funny, I knew that Oprah breathed the same air, drank really natural water, and all the greats that have been made that was on TV and the news breathe air just like me. And they're human beings just like me. But there is something they know that I didn't know. So I was really looking for answers on why I could see people are very smart in Zambia, but I couldn't understand why people struggled with stuff. And then that is information, the systems they have, the software and mindsets, their mindsets, the way they think, the way they view the world. I didn't understand that. So the more I started tapping onto different podcasts, TED Talks, just educational stuff, and in university, especially when they give us research, I wasn't just doing a paper, I was learning for myself as well. So I found it very empowering, and then I got to learn about different things, from communication to psychology, just different aspects, and then I could put my personal experiences to the experiences I had both from Zambia and then the US. And that being said, it led me to finding people that, starting to look for people that inspired me. People who would teach etiquette, femininity, business, marketing, sales, and all that good stuff. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So even if I'm listening to something that I find interesting and they mention a person or a book, I would pause right there, go look for the book, and start reading the book. And then I do that all the time when I'm listening to something, they mention a book or a person, a professor or a business person, anything that like gets my heart fired up. I'm like, stop right there, look for that thing, and then learn as much as possible. And with that, I am going to be sharing, which I've been doing in the past, more content on things that I have come to learn that mostly are not taught in school systems, but help people evolve and find their thing that ignites them, find some happiness, some peace, and try to create some prosperity for them. But it starts with awareness, to know that, well, awareness of something they don't know or something they didn't even know or that they've come to know, and then starting to consume that information and learn. So I do hope that most people can catch this video if, before they've traveled or when they've traveled, especially if they feel challenged or feel like they don't know or feel dumb or feel tiny or feel lost. It's just the mindsets of the place you are in and your social norms, which is your identity, can feel almost like death because you are accumulating new identities and new ways of seeing life. And sometimes that can be scary, but it requires letting go of something to learn something new. Just like you had to leave first grade before you can go to second grade, or when you go to second grade, you can't take the material from the first grade to the second grade. It's always evolving. The same thing happens. That understanding this can sometimes cause trauma. It can cause losing yourself without having anything to lash off, and some people get stuck in. So hope this is going to be very inspiring. Please like and share, and please subscribe to my channel. That way I can create more content even with my phone when I have more subscribers. And I'll be sharing more work on personal growth and femininity and all that good stuff. Why people do what they do, mindsets, and every or other yummy stuff. But today, just before going to bed, because I was just about to go to bed, no makeup, as you can see, I told myself, you're going to put a video, whether you're done or not done. Stop putting off. Do it right now. Go live. You haven't gone live. I think, I'm not sure, but I haven't gone live in a while. So it's like, just do it. Just do it. So please subscribe, like, and share. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great one.